Alrighty, what is up everybody? Today I am back with another video and we're going to be talking about every forgotten Skylander ever. I went through all the games, I pretty much picked out all the ones that I thought were forgotten, and today we're just going to talk about them and a few reasons why I think each of them is forgotten. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. Alrighty, so we are going to be going in chronological order here. So starting with Spyro's Adventure. I really don't think any Skylander from this game is forgotten. Every Skylander is at least unique in some way, and it's somewhat memorable just because they're part of the original 32. They're playable in every single game, and it's really hard for any of these to be forgotten because there aren't any gimmick Skylanders for these cores to be overshadowed by. So there are no gimmick or no forgotten Skylanders from Spyro's Adventure. Now, when we look at Giants, there are still very few. The one very notable one for me is Fright Rider. He has such an interesting and unique design, but for some reason he's so forgotten. No one ever talks about this guy, and as far as Giants cores go, I believe he was one of the only ones, if not the only one, to not get a repose or variant or anything like that. So this guy is pretty forgotten, and it's a shame because of how unique and how cool he is. He's like this undead, sort of like skeleton rider guy. He's really cool, but he's definitely forgotten. No one talks about him, and he's just kind of there, and no one really ever uses him either. Now moving on to Swap Force, there are quite a few from Swap Force. First off, Punk Shock. Punk Shock is, I hear about her more often than a lot of the Skylanders on here, but that's just because she's rare and not that many people have her. But she's kind of in that price range where she isn't like super well known for being like rare and expensive, but she isn't common and not that many people have her, so no one talks about her. She was obviously just kind of an overshadowed core in Swap Force. I know you got the new Swappers, that's what everyone's talking about, so it makes sense that she was forgotten. And it's pretty much the same story for Dunebug, who was just a core in Swap Force, and so it was hard for him to really stand out and really be able to shine. He would have shined in Giants or SSA, I guess, but not in Swap Force, where you got the Swappers who are going to take all the spotlight pretty much. And then Smolder Dash is another one. This one, although she had a light core, she just isn't talked about that much. Like, I don't really know anything about her, and I have her myself. I own Smolder Dash, and I barely use her, barely think about her, barely talk about her. She is very forgotten, and no one really pays much mind to her at all. And the last one I got is Grim Creeper for Swap Force. This guy, he got a light core too, but just no one talks about him. I feel like there's just better undead Skylanders, and nothing really sticks out with this guy's design. Like, it's a cool design, but there isn't anything special that's gonna make him memorable. He's a cool Skylander, but he isn't anything special, especially compared to a lot of the other undead ones. So that's really why I think Grim Creeper is forgotten. Now moving on to Trap Team, this is where there are just a ton of forgotten Skylanders. First off, Trailblazer. Trailblazer is clearly just a ripoff of Rapidash or Ponyta from Pokemon, and it's just a basic fire horse. There's really nothing interesting with Rapidash, or with Trailblazer, my bad. That should show you how similar they are. There's nothing really special about Trailblazer, nothing that would make him memorable in any way. He's just kind of a fire horse that is very forgotten. Now next up we got Cobra Kadabra. This guy I feel like shouldn't be forgotten, but he falls into kind of the same category as Punk Shock, where he's just known, but not, he's known for being somewhat expensive, but he's not expensive enough to where everyone's talking about him, everyone thinks he's super rare, everyone's trying to get him. He's just kind of not worth getting, and no one really wants him, even though he seems pretty cool. But this guy is definitely forgotten as far as Trap Team goes. Then next up we got Fling Kong. This, I believe, is the most forgotten Skylander ever. No one ever talks about this guy, and he's like $25 to $30 if you want to pick him up, so he's not very easy to get. No one knows any of his moves, no one ever talks about him. He looks pretty cool, like, I don't know what happened, but I think he was just one of the later wave Trap Team cores that was overshadowed by the Trap Masters. Now next up, we got a pretty similar story here with Flipwreck. He's about the same price as Fling Kong, maybe a few bucks cheaper, but he's like $25, and no one wants to pay that for a core when you could play a Snapshot or Lobstar for cheaper, especially Snapshot, and it's just like, this guy is not, he's not remembered. He's not memorable in really any way. While he doesn't have a bad design, like, his design's pretty cool, it just doesn't stand out among other Skylanders, especially in Trap Team, where you got the Trap Masters who are hogging up all the spotlight. There's just no room for Flipwreck and all that. Now next up is Rocky Roll. Rocky Roll has a very unique design. I actually own this guy myself, but he's definitely forgotten. No one really talks about him because no one really has him, but he's kind of in the same spot as a lot of these other cores have been, where he's expensive. He's like $30 to $40, but he's not super expensive where everyone's talking about him for being expensive. So it's just kind of that same thing over and over again, and this guy is overshadowed by the Trap Masters. He's just a weaker Skylander in Trap Team, and not many people have him, not many people talk about him, and he doesn't do much to stand out in Trap Team. He is very cool though, like he has a cool design and all that. He's just not going to stand out in the 4th game in the series. Next up we got Batspin. Very similar story to all the other ones, so I'm not going to go into depth. It's pretty much the same thing over and over again. She's forgotten because she's worth more than people are willing to pay for her, and she's overshadowed by the Trap Masters. Next up is kind of a different story though, which is Treadhead. This guy is just super cheap, and a lot of people have him, but no one talks about him. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because he's a core in Trap Team, and Gearshift and Jawbreaker are awesome Trap Masters that kind of take all the tech spotlight off him. I'm not sure what it is. No one talks about Treadhead. And then the last one is Fist Bump. Fist Bump is pretty awesome, and anyone who has him generally always likes him, and I personally love him, but this guy, no one talks about him. He feels like he should have been a core in Spyro's Adventure or Giants. He doesn't really fit with Trap Team, and because he's in Trap Team, Wallop just hogs all the spotlight. There's no room for this guy, and it's pretty sad, because he's a great Skylander, but he's definitely forgotten. Now moving on to Superchargers. Superchargers had a smaller roster, so it's more difficult for like a large chunk of the roster to be forgotten. But the one Skylander from Superchargers I think is forgotten is Splat. Splat is so just like blends in with the crowd. No one really thinks much of her. She's just kind of there. And I really think that's why she's the only forgotten one in Superchargers, because it's a small roster, and all the other ones are pretty memorable, some of them for the wrong reasons. Like Thrillapede's memorable because he's super rare, same with Double Dare Trigger Happy, but like a lot of the Superchargers characters are either expensive or they're cheap and affordable, but Splat is just kind of, she's more than you really want to pay for Splat, so that's why she ends up being pretty forgotten, because no one wants to get her, but she's pretty cool. Honestly, I like her. And moving on to Imaginators, there are a few Imaginators that I think are forgotten. Starting off with a Mysticat. This guy is very forgotten for a sensei. Like, no one really talks about him. I don't know if it's just because he has a bland design that doesn't make you want to play as him, or just because he seems like he would be weak in the game, or just because he's a sorcerer and you get a sorcerer straight out the starter pack. Not really sure about that one, but this guy is definitely forgotten. No one talks about him. Maybe it's because no one has him, but he doesn't look that enticing to get, and no one really wants to buy him. I don't know. This guy's definitely forgotten though. And then there's another sorcerer being Pit Boss. Pit Boss is a lot cooler though. Like, Pit Boss is a much cooler design in my opinion. I think Pit Boss is a lot cooler than Mysticat. But Pit Boss is definitely forgotten as far as sorcerers and undead senseis go. Like, this guy is just in the back of the crowd. Like, he's not doing much at all, and that's kind of weird considering he has a variant. Like, I have his variant. I have legendary Pit Boss, and I don't know, I just never think much of this guy. I don't really use him that much. He just kind of blends in with the rest of the senseis, so not much there. Next up is Ember. Ember is just someone that no one talks about. As far as Sentinels, like Barbella and Hoodsickle are both a lot more unique, and for fire senseis, like Flarewolf and Taekwondo Crow are some of the best. So the Ember just does nothing to stand out, nothing to make her interesting and someone you'd want to play as, but she is pretty cheap, so you can get her for like 15 bucks if you want to play as her, so basically retail, not too bad. Now next up is a slightly more expensive one, which is Tidepool. Tidepool's like 20 to 25 bucks most of the time. I got her for a really good deal. I didn't really pay anything for her, but she is definitely forgotten as far as water senseis. I mean, Kingpin and Graveclaw are so much cooler as far as design, and quick shots like Dr. Crankcase, I'm taking him over Tidepool all day. Nothing wrong with Tidepool, like there isn't any major issue with her. She is just like kind of there as far as senseis goes. She was released in a later wave, which does not help. A lot of people have already moved on from the game at that point, and Imaginators did not sell that well to begin with, so I mean, not that many people have her. She's pretty rare, but definitely forgotten. If you don't have her, I feel like there's no reason that you'd want to go out and get her. Now, last up is Aurora. Aurora should be like a pretty memorable Skylander because she is Eon's niece, I believe. So she, like, should have some pretty cool connections, but that doesn't really go anywhere. You know how bad Imaginators' story is, so there isn't really anything special that comes out of that. So not Ember, Aurora is just kind of there. As far as swashbucklers, chain reaction, bad juju, much rather play as them. And as far as light senseis, Blastertron just takes the cake over her all day. So Aurora, definitely forgotten, but she is decently cheap, so you can get her for like maybe 15 bucks. So that is going to wrap it up for all the Skylanders that I think are forgotten. I do want to thank you guys for staying till the very end of this video. It means a lot to me, and those are just my opinions. Pretty much, yeah, it's all my opinions on which Skylanders are forgotten. And if one of your favorite Skylanders is in this list, don't be offended. Like, I'm just saying these are the ones I think are forgotten. A lot of these are amazing. Like, I love so many of these Skylanders, but I do think they were overshadowed and forgotten to some extent, which I think is pretty sad. But thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.